Imagine a world where every barrier has been removed, a world where every boy and every girl is given the exact same toys, the same education, and the same opportunities. Common sense tells us that in this world, the differences between us would eventually shrink. We assume that if we treat everyone the same, we will eventually become the same. It's a beautiful, logical theory that suggests our personalities are just mirrors of the society we live in. But what if the data shows the exact opposite? What if the more equal a society becomes, the further apart men and women actually grow in their interests and personalities? This is the gender paradox, and it's one of the most challenging findings in modern psychology. To understand why these differences exist, we first have to agree on how to measure a human soul. In psychology, we don't use types or signs. We use the Big Five, also known as the ocean model. This is the gold standard of psychometrics because it remains stable across cultures and throughout our lives. The first is openness, which measures your curiosity and your appetite for new, abstract ideas. Then there is conscientiousness, the trait of orderliness, discipline, and how much you value getting things done. Extraversion is next, which isn't just about being loud, but about how much you crave social stimulation and positive emotion. Agreeableness is the measure of your compassion and politeness, how much you prioritize the needs of others over your own. Finally, there is neuroticism, which tracks your sensitivity to negative emotions like anxiety, sadness, or volatile stress. When researchers look at millions of people across the globe, they aren't looking at individuals. They're looking at the average shift in these five dials. What they found is that while men and women overlap significantly on most of these, there are consistent, measurable gaps that appear in every single culture studied. In the early 2000s, researchers turned their eyes towards Scandinavia, specifically countries like Norway and Sweden. These are the most egalitarian places on the planet. They've done more than almost any other culture to erase gender roles in the workplace and at home. The theory was simple. As social pressure disappears, the gaps in personality between men and women should disappear too. If women were only more agreeable because society forced them to be, then in Norway, that difference should vanish. But when the data came back, the researchers were stunned. Instead of the gaps shrinking, they had actually expanded. In the very places where men and women had the most freedom to be whoever they wanted to be, they chose to be more different than ever before. It's as if by removing the external pressure to conform, we inadvertently allowed our internal nature to take the wheel. This phenomenon is known as the gender equality paradox, and it flips our traditional understanding of sociology on its head. The standard social science model suggests that personality is purely a blank slate, written on by our culture and our parents. According to that model, if you remove the nurture that forces men to be stoic or women to be nurturing, the differences should zero out. But the data from over 200,000 individuals across 67 countries shows the exact opposite trend. As a country's gender equality index goes up, meaning better healthcare, higher GDP, and more legal protections, the personality gaps actually widen. One leading explanation from evolutionary psychology is that when you minimize the environment, you maximize the influence of biology. Think of it like a greenhouse. When you provide the perfect soil and plenty of water, the unique genetic potential of every plant is finally allowed to show. In a struggle for survival, everyone has to be the same, tough, hardworking, and focused on the immediate. But in a wealthy, safe society, you finally have the luxury to be who you actually are. Wealth and safety act as a buffer that allows our innate predispositions to flourish without being crushed by economic necessity. Think about the last time you had a completely free Saturday. No chores, no work emails, and no one telling you who you ought to be. What did you gravitate toward? For some of us, that freedom means diving into a complex technical project or fixing something broken. For others, it's the immediate urge to call a friend, host a dinner, or engage with people. When the noise of survival or social expectation is turned down, our natural signal gets louder. We often think of stereotypes as cages that hold us back. But in the most equal societies on Earth, those cages have been opened. And yet, instead of everyone flying in the same direction, we see a massive divergence. It turns out that when you give people the ultimate luxury, the luxury of choice, they don't use it to become identical. They use it to become more of who they already are. When we zoom into the data, we see that the differences aren't random. They follow a specific pattern. One of the most robust findings is the people versus things dimension. On average, women tend to show a stronger interest in people, which includes social systems, psychology, and organic life. Men, on average, tend to show a stronger interest in things, which include mechanics, abstract systems, and inanimate objects. In less developed nations, people often choose their careers based on what puts food on the table. If a people-oriented man needs to work in a factory to survive, he does it. If a thing-oriented woman needs to work in healthcare for a stable salary, she does it. But in an egalitarian society, the economic pressure is lifted. This allows the interest gap to widen, leading to the lopsided gender ratios we see in fields like nursing versus engineering in the West. Beyond interest, we see small but consistent gaps in the big five traits themselves. For example, women globally tend to score higher in agreeableness and neuroticism. While the difference for any one individual might be small, when you look at a whole population, these small shifts create a massive multivariate difference. It's the difference between two slightly overlapping bells. At the extremes, the gap becomes enormous. Think about a student standing in front of a university notice board. In a country where every penny counts, that student is looking for the safe bet. They might love poetry or social work, but if the economy's fragile, they'll choose accounting or medicine because they have to. Their personality is being compressed by the reality of survival. But now, look at that same student in a society with a perfect safety net. Suddenly, the risk of following their heart is gone. They are free to lean into their most natural, internal inclinations without fear of poverty. This is the hidden engine of the paradox. When we give people total security, we aren't just giving them money, we're giving them the freedom to be different. The lopsided numbers we see in certain jobs aren't necessarily a sign of a broken system. They might actually be a sign of a system that is finally working well enough to let people choose based on who they are, rather than what they need. So, what does all of this mean for how we build our world? It suggests that equality of opportunity and equality of outcome are actually in competition with one another. If you maximize the freedom to choose, you will naturally get a variety of outcomes, because people are not interchangeable units. The gender paradox teaches us that variance isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature of human freedom. When we stop forcing people into boxes based on economic need or social pressure, they don't settle into a gray middle ground. Instead, they move toward the edges of their own unique potential. The goal of a healthy society isn't to make everyone the same. It's to ensure that the thing-oriented woman and the people-oriented man have the same door open to them, regardless of where they eventually decide to walk. By understanding the Big Five and the paradox of equality, we can move past the shouting matches. We can start appreciating the fact that a free society is a diverse one, not just in how we look, but in how we think and what we value.